Hi, everybody. If you could take your seats, we'll get started. Um, Great, thank you. Hi, I am Farrah Warner. I'm the Executive Director of the Metcalf Institute. And I just wanted to welcome all of you and say thank you for being in the room. And we also have a bunch of people on the live stream. So that is really wonderful. Um, I just wanted to say a couple of things about the Metcalf Annual Lecture Series, and then we're going to have three people who are really wonderful supporters and sponsors of Metcalf for this lecture series. But a year ago, we really reimagined the lecture series so that we could provide lectures during the academic year as opposed to what we used to do, which was lots of lectures in June. And they were, because it was sort of coming out of the COVID era, they were also all on Zoom. And so we really wanted to reimagine actually bringing people together and particularly having, being able to have our students take part in these lectures. And the other thing that we reimagined as well is really wanting to work with our colleagues across campus to be working to support each other's work. And if we had a really cool speaker coming in to say, like Dan Hunt from the Harrington School, like we have these really interesting people, do you want them to come and talk to your class? And so this year, I'll have to say that this spring lecture really truly shows this work that we've done to be a collaborator on campus as Metcalf. And we have three wonderful supporters for this lecture who will be speaking about degree programs that help our students pursue environmental work. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Sweetman, who is Associate Professor of Education, who leads URI's new Environmental Education degree program. She also brought her fan club. Um, and along with Ryan Trim, who's a professor of English. You can stay up here. Professor of English and Film Media, and also Ben Johnson, who's an instructor. Yay! Instructor at Department of Philosophy, who will speak about the new Environmental Arts and Humanities degree, which is being offered through the College of Arts and Sciences, which is also supporting this lecture. So I just wanted to thank Sarah, Ryan, and Ben, and welcome you guys to come up because they're going to give a little bit of a brief preview of what they do. So, Sarah, if you'd like to come.
You want me to stand here because there are people on Zoom? Or it doesn't matter? All right. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Sarah Sweetman. I am in the College of Education here at URI, and I am very excited today to share just a few minutes about the Environmental Education program. It's a brand new degree program, a BS in Environmental Education. And I get the question a lot as I was developing this program and getting it opened of, we have a lot of environmental, and today you're going to hear about that. We have environmental science classes and degree programs, and how is this different? And, I think about that idea of environmental science. You're learning about the world around you, you're collecting the data, and learning from the Metcalf Institute how to share that with others. In environmental education, we're really people facing instead of science facing, right? So the students are learning how to take that knowledge and that information and transform it into experiences for people in our community. Most of the students the fantastic students that have joined the initial program that are here tonight are looking at, the program is really designed more for non-formal spaces. So getting jobs at zoos, aquariums, nature centers as educators. Those community members actually reached out to me and said, we hire people with science content knowledge, but that when the 78 kids show up, they're not sure exactly what to do with that. And so the need from the community really drove the idea of the degree program. And then so specifically within the degree program, there's a portion of it that is getting some content knowledge, taking those content classes and getting that background. A portion that's on environmental justice in the community. When you work at a zoo, you might have a 3-year-old coming, you might have a 97-year-old coming. How do we talk to all the different people that come through these spaces and places? And then there's also a section on like teaching and pedagogy and best practices that we think about in educational programming. There's a minor in the degree program, so there's the things you're going to hear tonight of the other programs. There's ways to do majors and minors. There's also the BS major. And coming soon, we're working right now on a 4+1 program, which is an undergraduate plus 1 year of graduate school. You get your master's degree in 1 year. That would lead to teacher certification in environmental education, specifically aimed at high school CTE programs, career and tech programs. The other, probably I would say, a big highlight of our program is that we have received EC4 funding as a pass through DEM, and our internships are paid internships. So right now we have a student at Mystic Aquarium, we have a student at the Compass School, and we have a student at Audubon who are doing their internships. The student gets paid, and the organization also gets paid to develop their mentorship. And it's really, the degree program has been designed specifically with the best practices in education in mind. So every class should be active. The students are engaged in experiencing the things that we're hoping they're gonna go out in the world and do. And so if that's the kind of learner you are, where you like to be out and actively learning, it's a great program for you. And I will hit the next button. Maybe. Did I go twice?
No.
Oh.
Thank you. So I'm also here to talk about another brand spanking new program. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because my colleague, Professor Ben Johnson, is going to talk a little bit more about what's of most interest, which would be the classes that we have to offer. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of background for the Environmental Arts and Humanities. So it's a program that was started around 3 years ago. When a group of us in the College of Arts and Sciences wanted to sort of build off of existing classes in a number of different programs and to design something that would allow us to really go forward with that. And so it's something where the idea was to provide a background where students could be prepared to communicate, get jobs communicating about environmental issues to a larger audience, to move forward in communications areas, to look at nonprofit work focusing on environmental problems and solutions, professions addressing international audiences regarding environmental issues, creative careers that might touch on environmental themes, and also graduate school in areas such as environmental law and environmental philosophy. So, as you can see, it's drawing from a range of different disciplines that encompass the social sciences, the humanities, communications, the fine arts. So it's a broad ranging program. And so the idea is that students will not only have a background in the sciences, but also take classes in areas such as communications, to be able to talk to broader audiences about environmental issues, to get the human context regarding environmental issues and being able to speak on that. And so Professor Will Krieger has been our fearless leader, and so that's the person to contact. And you also have information on how to access our webpage. So I will now turn it on over to Ben. He'll tell us a little bit more about some of our follow-on.
I might be even more brief than Ryan, but I'm just here basically for the students who are here for the most part. I'm here to just let you know if you are interested in taking EAH classes and you're interested, you maybe want to just like wade your feet in the water of environmental arts and humanities. These are the classes that are on our rolls for this coming semester, fall 2026. And there is a QR code here. This just takes you to the course descriptions page for EAH classes. So if you want to learn more about the courses that we have, that's all the courses that EAH currently offers. But these are the ones that are specifically offered next semester. The first one is the one that I teach, Intro to Environmental Arts and Humanities. In that class, you'll do an overview of a bunch of different kind of topics in environmental arts and humanities, specifically getting the kind of conceptual backgrounds, talking about concepts like intrinsic value of nature, environmental philosophy, or talking about things like what is wilderness, and how does this relate to things like colonialism or these kinds of questions. Um, and then also, talking about things like ecofeminism or environmental justice and injustice. And so you'll get a pretty broad overview of what it means to do environmental arts and humanities. If you're interested in this at all, I would say sign up for the class. It's a great class. It fulfills a lot of gen ed requirements. So, just Google it, search it on the class search system. And then we have a bunch of other classes you can see, from the English department to the writing department, to anthropology. We have communication studies. We have also some science classes that are also helpful for environmental arts and humanities majors and required, I think, for the major, such as environmental geology and natural resource conservation. And we even have things like Music 301, music as a form of social protest. So if you want to, learn more about environmental arts and humanities, and you are interested in maybe doing like a double major or a major minor type of thing, as Ryan said, maybe email Dr. Krieger, or just look up some of these classes. You could take pictures. You could talk to me later also if you need a copy of this or something. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. Yeah, thank you. When I first heard about the environmental arts and humanities degree, I was like, one, I really wish I could go back and be in school. And two, I really want to take that, the writing about disasters, or I actually think a lot of journalists need to take that course. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce our speakers for the evening. At Metcalf, we've been looking forward to this lecture for quite a while because it includes two Metcalf alumni. And we've really been thinking about it since we heard that Mira Subramanian's new graphic novel was coming out. A Better World is Possible, Global Youth Confront the Climate Crisis. Mira is a 2012 Metcalf alumna and an award-winning freelance journalist who writes narrative nonfiction about home in the personal and planetary sense in a time of climate crisis. Her work has appeared in publications such as Nature, the New York Times, and the New Yorker. My favorite part of her bio was this: she is a perpetual wanderer who can't stop digging in the dirt to plant perennials, then looking up in search of birds for her home base atop a glacial moraine on the Atlantic's western edge. She'll be in conversation with Rhode Island author Liz Rush, a 2015 Metcalf alumna, who is the author of The Quickening, Antarctica, Motherhood, and Cultivating Hope in a Warming World, which you can buy on the back table, and Rising, Dispatches from the New American Shore. Please note that there will be a book signing after the conversation, so please stay for that, and also there will be a Q&A. But Mira and Liz, I would love to welcome you to the stage.
So I too have really been looking forward to this event. Mira and I actually met in a Metcalf training in 2016. We went to St. Louis together, and we went to like an adaptation conference, and I was so thrilled to be a part of this training. And they, in fact, put us into the same hotel room. And initially I was like, I don't know about sharing a hotel room with someone I don't know. But it turned out to be Mira Subramanian, and we have become like dear friends in the time since then. So I've been so excited about your book. It has brought me an incredible amount of joy and a sense of grounding. I've been reading it with my son before he goes to bed at night. My son's 5 years old. And I felt like, in our house we talk about climate change. It's not a word, it's not like he doesn't hear it, but this was my first real attempt to kind of expose him to the topic. And it's such a stunning introduction because it really places things like parts per million and the Keeling curve alongside climate anxiety.
Those are his favorite parts,
right?
right?
Well, actually, he loves, he's like, can we look at the atomic structure of carbon? And can we look at the atomic structure of oxygen? Like, he actually was really into the science. And it also will put like that alongside of the carbon footprint, and also the idea that like BP offloaded sort of climate anxiety and shame and grief onto us through the proliferation of the carbon footprint. So it's like a lot of layers of thinking. Um, and it's all stitched through with the story of 4 different activists who are organizing different climate protests and strikes and walkouts. And so I also got questions like, what's a strike, mama? And to have him ask that question alongside this other kind of like scientific planetary question around like, oh, it's flooding, why is it flooding more? And to get those two things together and to be able to introduce them simultaneously such that he gets the message from the very start that there are things that can be done, that it's not that one is without options entirely. It feels like such a gift, and it's been a wonderful experiment exposing him to it. So I'm just really grateful for it, and couldn't have come at a more perfect time. And it's absolutely stunningly gorgeous. But we'll show some slides in a second. I wanted to start by just asking you, what was the genesis? Because it is a departure from the more narrative stuff that you've done.
Yeah. I'm usually long form narrative, long sentences, complex ideas, a lot of reporting out in the field. Can everybody hear okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I had been sort of fishing around for a second book project. I wrote a book about India and environmental issues there. Lots of science in that one. And it was like kind of happenstance. I ran into a friend, Danica Novgorodov is an illustrator. We both lived in New York at one point, so we were kind of like friends in the same circles. And right before the pandemic hit, we were at a mutual friend's book event in Brooklyn, and I was just like, Danica, what are you working on? And she said, I've got this like book I'm trying to do a graphic novel about youth climate activists, but I just don't like, I feel like I'm writing a textbook. I'm just like studying climate science, but I don't really understand it. and I was like, we should, like, I do story, let's talk. And it really just grew out of that. Lockdown just locked us all down, and this project just began during that period. And part of me also was just very, I've been doing environmental journalism as a freelancer for 20 years. And I was kind of just ready for some new audience, some new way of storytelling. And so part of that was like really intriguing to me of like, how do I digest all of this accumulating knowledge that I've collected through all these different stories, and then turn it into something that can like be for a new audience about this issue that I feel is like so fundamentally important about our lives. Like, this is the story of the century. There's so many other stories that keep like taking our attention away, but like this story is just going to keep, I'd say snowballing, but we need like a new term for that because there won't be snowballs. So like, what does that look like? And it just felt really appealing to like, how can we help bring a new generation into understanding what this issue is about? And there were no books that were like this. You know, there were picture books like, yay, Greta, cute braids, you know, like there just didn't feel like there was something that actually like taught you stuff, but also inspired you with stories of real people. So that was like how it all kind of evolved.
And I'm curious, like, I often think of my job as a climate communicator. Let's say there's like kind of like the science, and my job is often to stitch the human story around the science.
Yeah.
And this book, I feel like, does something different. Like, how can I put it? I think we have pedagogically been taught a lot of climate stuff in very siloed ways.
Yeah.
And it's really neat to see, for instance, the environmental arts and humanities, because I will tell you, like, that didn't exist in any way, shape, or form when I was in college.
No, I mean, environmental studies was like
Also maybe
just
didn't
barely
exist.
starting. But yeah, I totally agree. This program, like this, all the list of classes that you just showed, then like they're like the interludes in this book, like there's like music happening in the beginning of the protest. I guess maybe should I explain what the whole structure of the thing?
Yes, maybe. Okay, before I was gonna like make us talk about the different silo things, but tell us a little bit about the structure. Tell us about the climate activists that you worked with.
Okay. So the basic gist of the book is that like, okay, when I was working, when Danica and I were first brainstorming, I'm like, we need narrative, we need like a place, we need a scene, we need like real people. You know, let's talk. And she had gone to the 2019 climate strike march in New York City. Anybody? Did anybody? Yeah, nice. All right. Yeah. She was there with her baby, and so I was like, okay, you were there. That was like 250,000 people out on the streets, part of millions of people gathering all over the world. And it was mostly youth led. That was like an amazing event that was like youth led. And so we're like, who are those kids? Who made that happen? And so, you know, luckily the thing was on YouTube, so I was able to watch the entire video,
Really?
and like just take notes of like every single speaker that was introduced and stuff, and then like doing, you know, being a journalist and doing the research and looking at all the news articles, who was quoted, because there's people who are organizing who are behind the scenes who are not on stage. So we kind of came up with like a list of people. We just started reaching out to them, like, hey, we're doing a book, like, would you want to talk to us? And we ended up talking to, I don't know, I remember six or eight people or something like that, and then we were looking for geographic and different stories about like what made them care about it and different geographies, and so we settled on 4 kids. And so the 4, I don't think I have a picture of the 4 kids. That's bad. I don't remember it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was also really floored. The person I'm married to is from Colombia, and so we very much our kids are kind of being raised between 2 different worlds, and that was also an element of this book that I thought was so brilliant. That you have, like, one of the activists is from Mexico and is relocating to the United States. You have this other activist who's from Bangladesh, or her parents are from Bangladesh.
Yeah. So she's from Bangladesh. Yeah, one of them is from Mexico. One is from Seattle, but her mother's from Colombia. And then Shiv is the son of Indian immigrants. So, but all of them were like living in New York City at that point. So they came from different places. And so, like, yeah, we followed their 4 stories. We start at the march. We flash back each time a kid is introduced. We flash back to like what formed their life. Like the driving question is like, what makes a 15-year-old kid be so focused and on this issue? Like what shaped their young lives? So that was like the repeating question. So we flash back to their lives and bring the story forward. But then every once in a while, we have like little mini Danica and mini me, is what we called them in the manuscript, who were just like, wait, what is climate change anyway? And you know, so we have Danica calling up, let's call my Mira's my science journalist friend. She talks to scientists. Let's call her up. And then we get into the science. So like, you know, in grad school, there was one teacher who said like, information is the death of narrative. And it is like really challenging to weave together like actually teaching things, and storytelling is the sugar that makes it all go down. And so we just had, you know, like the process that was actually real life. Or Danica like didn't really know that much about this stuff, so she's like, what is climate change? So when we talk about that, and then we're like, explore what is environmental injustice, and we explore that, and what does religion have to do with it, and what about wildlife biodiversity, what are these extreme weather events? So there's all these like little interludes sprinkled throughout the narrative that help like
and part of what I think, I mean, it's very clear that I'm very passionate about this project. I really love it. Part of what I liked so much about that is going back to that thinking around sort of siloing. It's like, yes, there might be a religion and environment class, but that class is like literally in a different building in a different part of campus than the like OChem, like organic chemistry class. And this book is really making them hang out together. And I think there's something, for me, as I was reading it to my son, it gave me a very strong, visceral feeling that maybe is kind of what you're describing between you and Danica, which is like, there was a decade in my life where I felt like I kind of onboarded a lot of information around how to think and relate to like the story of our century. And I feel like you've done this really beautiful kaleidoscopic job where you're like taking all those classes that hang out in different buildings and you're being like, what if we just put them in the same building? And it feels really special to me in that way. And it almost felt like, oh yeah, what if you did get to digest it in a way that allowed you to think about it from lots of different angles?
Yeah, because there's so much connecting the dots, and like that's trying to replicate what the kids were experiencing of like why they cared about it. They were connecting the dots. They're like 5, 10, 15 years old, and they're recognizing like, oh, wait a second, when I have an asthma attack and almost die in Delhi from air pollution, like that relates to what I'm learning in my like UN class, and that's relating to like the IPCC report that I heard that tells us they have till 2030 to bring emissions down. And so like they were connecting the dots, and so like it was just it's so we need help doing that, right? Because we get information from all these disparate directions, and it's so rare that we have the time or the ability to, we have to really sit and think about it if we are to connect the dots ourselves. So like a little help along the way.
You're also making me realize, we did meet at this adaptation conference, and I remember very distinctly, I don't know, like day 2 or 3, one of us figured out that there was a Calder Museum in St. Louis, and we were like, well, what if we left the conference for a day?
We would never have done that though.
Never.
We would have done that.
Or a half a day. And what if we go to the Calder Museum? And the distinct memory I have of us is like, they were very sort of hands off with these sculptures that I think of as
Right,
like.
does everybody know Calder? Calder he makes mobiles, so they had these they'd be like these lamps, but they would be mobiles, but they need wind to move. Like they just are just sitting there. If they're often outside, so that they respond to the environment. But
They were sitting in these rooms like this one, not moving. And so Mira, you were like, what if we like? We were like, yeah. What if we do this? What if we like try to make a whirlpool of wind around them? And then we totally got in trouble.
We did.
But in the context of this conversation and thinking about this project and thinking about what it was like to onboard all this information for 10 years, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the importance in your life, in your writing practice, in your journalism, for also taking, like, how do you care for yourself through this process? Because it's not actually an easy thing to live inside of.
No, it's not. It's not an easy thing to help with.
Yeah.
There's an interlude about eco grief. One of the Jamie, who's the Colombian American who lives in Seattle. She really dealt with serious mental health issues. She came home to Seattle in 2018 when the whole West was on fire. Seattle. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. So did Liz. Like, you live for the summers because the winters are like this for 10 months, and then the summer is like blue sky, beautiful, like lovely. And that summer of 2018, you couldn't go outside because the wildfire smoke was so bad, like across the entire Pacific Northwest. And Jamie had friends who had dealt with the hurricane in Maria in Puerto Rico. All of these things were happening. She was 15, 16 years old, and she was just paralyzed by feeling like it was just like apocalypse, and she wasn't even of age. It was and so we dealt with ego grief, and Danica and I have both dealt with it. I think anybody who is in this space deals with it on some level. And so in terms of, I think recognizing it is one big part of it. Recognizing, and this is actually what this this section is about. Should we read this one page? Where you
Sure.
Danica?
Okay, I'll be Danica.
Let me help you.
I was
find
like,
it.
yeah, what page is it?
Let's see. Because you can't read that, can you? No, I don't think so. Okay, it is on. There's not a page number 74.
Okay.
There's a polar bear on the right.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Okay, so you're definitely not alone. A recent survey of young people from around the world show that more than half thought that humanity is doomed because of climate change. These feelings are completely natural. I experience them too, and so does everyone I know who recognizes the climate crisis. Some of those feelings led me to decide I didn't want to have a child. It's a personal choice that we all need to make for ourselves. By the way, this is like one of my favorite panels with where like Danica, this is where like her art was like, I just made a manuscript and then she just did this transformation, like this act of like bringing somebody in was so beautiful.
So true. Sometimes the climate crisis just feels like an assault on everything good and hopeful in the world. But our response reveals who we are, don't you think?
I do. Despair is the dark side of the light of love, right? They're like twinned emotions. It can be really hard, but it feels like an inseparable part of being alive. To care deeply about the natural world is to fear losing it.
And climate change makes it feel like we're at risk of losing everything we love. I sometimes wonder if humans will even survive.
I know, and humans are animals too, and we cannot live without all the other life on Earth. And that segues into talking about biodiversity loss and the threats to the natural world. But there are, yeah, I mean, so like it's a very real thing. So one is acknowledging it, finding community so you don't feel so alone, and then trying to step away from the things that give you grief and remember, like when I say it's the twin side of love, like go do the things that you love, go experience the places that are here, and like there's something kind of precious that when you realize something is threatened, you pay more attention to it. So like take that time to pay attention to it and take care of your body, take care of your body in the world. Just paying attention because it's all here. I mean, there are things that I've written stories about vultures in India, and like vultures were like sparrows; they were just everywhere, and then they just like vanished. They just disappeared. So like recognizing that everything is kind of can be ephemeral, and to just enjoy it and be present with it is so valuable.
I think that one of the things that we originally connected over was both having lived in the Pacific Northwest and having loved living out there. Um, I know, now this is where I get to like use my friend flex. I know that you, I think of it as you lived sort of in an intentional community in Oregon. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that experience segued into a career in environmental journalism? Because it doesn't necessarily, like, that's not an obvious path for a lot of folks.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I did. So they didn't have environmental studies when I was in school. That's like what I wanted to do. I got very interested in the environment when I was like a sophomore in college. And so I studied anthropology and with a minor in Spanish. And I wanted to do nonprofit work. I'm like, please, I just want to go out there and not make money. That was my goal. I have satisfied that goal my whole life. So I had trouble finding. It was a recession when I graduated. I did work with adults with developmental disabilities for a couple of years, and then finally I was able to segue into doing more environmental work, and that eventually led me to working. I went as an intern to an intentional community on 40 acres on a land trust in Western Oregon. That was a sustainable living school, sustainable living skills research center and school. So I went there as an intern, and we were like learning organic gardening by doing organic gardening and sustainable forestry. We were building our own buildings out of experimental materials like straw bales. We were cooking food on stoves that we were developing for use in the developing world. So it was very hands-on living, all like pre-internet, all that stuff, just really very close, living very close to the earth. So I went there as an intern, and then I just stayed involved in that place for 8 years. And I loved it. I swore I was never going to leave. I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't miss the East Coast. I was like out west. And then I just was doing more and more writing. And I think I'd always had this idea that you were like born a writer. And it wasn't until I was like 30 where I was like, oh, maybe I like to write and I can go to school to become a better writer. It just didn't dawn on me. Nobody told me that. And so, I was just wanting to write more complex stories for a wider audience. And so I applied to University of Oregon and didn't get into the program. I got into like the shitty program at University of Oregon, and then I got into the NYU program in cultural reporting criticism, which was very about long form narrative writing. And so I was like, I'll just go to New York for a couple of years and then I'll just go right back to Oregon. And then life happens. But so yeah, that time in Oregon was very formative for me. I write about it in the book. It seems like I write about it in almost every piece I write. Like it just keeps coming back, because living in a way that you're very dependent on the natural resources around you. It's not just coming in from some faraway fake place. Like you're saying, like, hey, can you check the water, because I think the spring hose stopped off at the shower. Can you make sure that the water is at the right pressure so it kicks the heater in? Like you are very close to the elements, and it makes you realize we live on a finite planet, and it's so easy, especially in our American environment, to think that all this stuff just comes from some magical faraway place, and it doesn't. It's all like very real. And so I think that really, really stuck with me. But when I went to grad school, I just ended up writing about the same damn thing. It's like I was finding green stories within the urban environment. And it feels like, and when I went, the book in India was focusing on the cook stoves that we had been building and developing in Oregon, and about organic farming. And like I have thought about the same things for 35 years at this point. Which is good. But coming at them from all these different angles, which is nice to know that you can do that. You can like be interested in the same thing and like tack and come at it from different angles, and it can make it more interesting. Yeah.
I think of something that kind of abides in your work is a deep commitment to story. We have a climate change reading group that we're both a part of, and there's like maybe 5 other people, and I think we kind of run a spectrum from like the ethical pessimist to, I think Mira and I are both probably sort of on the slightly other end of the spectrum, but I somehow have always tied both yours and my belief in story as part of what tacks us out there.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe not out
Yeah.
there. I don't know. Like maybe it's here, but
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, like Roy Scranton is another person who's in that group, and he has like How to Die in the Anthropocene. Yeah, and I totally want to do a book event with him. Like I think that'd be really fun. But it's basically based in neuroscience. Like it is like the science is there that we are storytelling creatures. Like this whole modern world is like a tiny little blink in human evolution, and the way that we learned stories was by sitting around fires and doing this very like primal thing of conveying information to each other. We were not doing bulleted lists of data points, except for very, very recently. And so, if I tell you right now to like imagine a tennis match, just imagine a tennis match, like parts of your brain that if you were playing tennis are lighting up right now. It's like when I tell you about getting shivers, something happens, in your body. Like, and so there's such power in writing of being able to try to bring people to a place and help them make them feel it, like in their bodies. I couldn't do that as much in this, like that was like kind of the words that had to fall on the cutting floor, because that's the stuff that comes in the long form writing. But I think the visuals that Danica was able to do help bring that back in a way that I can't say that, like that your skin prickled, or you smelled something, or like all those sensory things that make the narrative writing. But I just think that is how we learn. And then there was like a miserable time, I think, within the climate activism work that, maybe I want to say like 2005 to 15, where it was like, okay, climate change is really a problem. We haven't been listening to all the people for the past 30 years, but like it's beginning to filter into the general public that climate change is a problem. And then we're like, okay, we'll just give them a bunch of data. And then everybody will, like, if we tell them how many feet the sea level is going to rise, they will rush to action. And like, that was like a decade that didn't work. That did not move the needle.
And then there was like half a decade that was like, the end is nigh! And that was also like clearly not helpful either.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like kind of just following the science that is what works. And that I love stories. I enjoy reading stories. I get engaged and they pull me in. And so we try to write stories that pull other people in.
Could you tell us a little bit about the story behind the scenes of working with these student activists? As in, like, what did, because this is something I think about a lot as a writer. I consider myself a writer, not a journalist. And then I think that kind of like changes the question of to whom you're ethically responsible.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about really working with, I mean, I suppose maybe when you started, some of these kids were underage. Have
Yeah.
their feelings about what they're doing and the book changed as you've worked with them? How did you get consent? What did
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of naive about the whole endeavor. I approached it like a journalist. Technically, there's no firm line about when you need consent from high school kids. Are like, like there's all these different standards like that say that high school kids kind of have the autonomy to be able to speak on their own behalf. They are already out in the world. The kids also that we were focusing on were already semi-public figures because they had chosen to take public stances, that they were already out there. So I never felt like I needed to ask for their mommy or daddy signatures. We contacted them and said, we're working on a book. Would you like to be part of it? Are you willing to share your story? And then we recorded those interviews and did them. It was during the pandemic, so it was all just on Zoom. I still haven't met them in person.
No.
Danica and I haven't been in the same room since we met at that bar.
Really?
She's only in Louisville. I've been like all these other places, but yeah, that's like the strange thing about the pandemic of how much stuff just went remote that you even forget. This is the first time we've met today, but I was like, I feel like we've met because we've seen each other on Zoom. But that, so that process was getting their stories from them, asking them for a primary documentation, like trying to get pictures of their houses and things like that, finding out when they weren't comfortable with it, like I don't want to share a picture of my house, I don't really want to say what town I live in, and making sure that we sent them, this is very different than journalism, they got to read this and give us feedback to make sure that we were getting it right. The hardest part was that once the manuscript was basically done, multiple years into the project, then suddenly Macmillan's legal department was like, there's kids in the book. And
You guys knew there were kids in the book.
That was a good year. So like by then they were like already 18 and stuff like that, but they did sign off on the book legally for the press.
And can I ask, I would just want to pause and say, like, so you shared with them the manuscript. Did they want things changed? And how did you deal with that?
They only wanted like certain, nothing major. Some things were just like, one of them we put in an asterisk because she was like super pro Hillary Clinton at one point, and so we had that scene of her younger. She's like, I'm not down with that anymore. So I had to put a little asterisk, like, So we would just try. We were definitely trying to accommodate to make sure that their story, that they felt like their stories were well represented. And it seems like we've done that. The kids are amazing. They are all. Gia Bastida has like 3 of the 4 kids have started nonprofits, so they're all still doing this work on different levels. Gia was just named like Forbes 30 under 30. She is just doing like incredible work all over the world. Jamie Margolin has her own organization, and she's doing great work and has graduated from NYU Film School. Shiv has his own nonprofit and is helping to get green politicians elected in New York City and get solar put on schools.
Now I want an event where you guys all actually just sit in in a row alongside one
another. If you want to travel down to Brooklyn on April 14th, we're going to be there, me and Danica, at the same bookstore that we went. It's so meta, where we met for the Mutual Friends event in 2020. So Danica and I will be there with, I think, 3 of the kids. 2 will be on stage with us, and I think one of them said she might show up too. So
that's very exciting.
It's going to be very exciting. I'm really looking forward to that.
I think that's a lovely image for us with which to open the conversation. So if folks in the audience have any questions, I think we have microphones that'll go around. See one back there.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
Hi.
Yeah.
I had a question kind of about like the distribution side of things. I'm just curious, like, because I don't really know much about the publishing world, but while you were writing this, did you just kind of do this in your
No, so usually Danica had pitched the idea to a publisher because you have to make sure everything is like even and basically all nonfiction. You pitch an idea before you do any of the work because a story for one outlet is going to look totally different from a different outlet. So you're always coming them with the idea, and then once an editor or a publisher is on board, then you do the work so that you're like in conversation. So she already had the book deal when she brought me on as the writer, and because the artwork, this is all hand watercolored. She did digital outlines, but the paint. So we wanted the manuscript to be like zipped up before she like picks up her paint. Like it takes her a day to do a single page, so at least. So we. I wrote the whole manuscript. She and I were going back and forth. Like I took the lead on that, but we were doing it together, back and forth. Sharing it with the kids, getting their feedback, showing it to outside readers, getting other feedback, just to make sure it was like we had all these different interludes. So like we were fact checking, like to climate scientists to make sure we get the terminology correct, and to people in the religion space to make sure we had the different sections on religion to get right, like all this other work that happened. Once that was all done, then she penciled out the whole thing, just like super loose sketches. Like I'm thinking like 4 panels here, 1 big page here. Went through that whole thing with the editor, and only after that was all done, then did she finally start. So it was a 6-year process because of all of those different stages. But yeah, you definitely have the publisher, whether it's a journalism piece or a book, on board before you do it. It's very different than like fiction. Fiction, you write the whole book and then you're shopping it around, but nonfiction tends to be much more proposal based.
Can you advance and show us
Yeah.
like 1 or 2 more?
Yeah, so here's one of the big widespreads. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I know you guys had mentioned that like there was kind of like a spectrum, like leaning towards like pessimist, or, like the whole view of like all the climate crisis. I was thinking about maybe getting the book for I work at the Compass School for the internship, and I guess I was kind of wondering what you think the best age group is for this, because I know you had mentioned you read it to your son, but I do know that it's important for kids to like not feel scared of these things when they're young. So
Right.
I guess I was wondering what age group you think would be best.
Yeah, that's such a good question because I've been very surprised when she's telling me she's reading. It was
an experiment. I was like, I have to read it. Let's see if I can read it to Miko at bedtime, and it like worked.
It worked. We wrote it for a YA audience, thinking like in my mind I had like a 9th grader, thinking this could go into middle school, it could go into high school, it could go into college, but we tried to write it at multiple levels, and now that it's out in the world, it feels like that has been working. Like I've been getting really amazing responses from like does anybody listen to Drilled podcast by Amy Westervelt? Incredible investigative climate journalist. She has a 13-year-old, and so she's reading the book, and she was like, I do this work, but like I don't really know how to talk to my kid about it. You know, she is in like a deep, and so she was like, said her 13-year-old was like, what are you reading? What's that? So and other people have told me also that it feels like it's like a way to open a door to a conversation. So I feel like that could be parents talking to their kids about it, or vice versa. Maybe the kids care about it and their parents don't get it, and this could be a way to bridge that. And then the interludes being all researched and fact checked, we're hoping that it's a teaching tool as well, that it can be in the classroom. So, but adults, we've also heard from people who are like in this space as adults, and they're just like, oh, I actually learned a lot. I learned a lot writing it, and this is my like beat. So like, hopefully there's like levels that you can read at all over the place. There's one section which is like super wonky. It's like a whole
The
history
timeline.
of like hundreds of years timeline of like, what did we know when? Like, when do you think we knew how to generate electricity from wind and solar? Anybody want to guess?
I agree with the book. I don't want to mess it up, but I was astounded.
Yeah.
It was 18.
Yeah, 1880s. 1880s. This is not new. this is like not new at all. And so it's like all this alternative energy. Like it's not alternative. It's been, and then we get into the mis and disinformation of fossil fuel companies that they knew in 1968 that it was the polar ice caps were going to be melting by the 2000s. And they were like exactly right on about how many parts per million of carbon dioxide would be in the atmosphere based on the burning of fossil fuels. They knew that in 1968, and then 1969, they're like, our doubt is our product. That's what we're going to produce, doubt. And they did, and they have. So that chronology is there. That's probably not for the 5-year-olds.
I totally skipped the chronology. I was like, there's not enough pictures in the chronology for him.
But there is a whole story in there that adults could read, like college students could use it to like, there's stories embedded in that, in those kinds of things. So hopefully multiple pages.
Yeah, thank you very much. A wonderful talk. I'm really interested in digging down on the grief part of it, and because I think that's such a big element of stasis too, but also just what we're all going through. I think.
Yeah.
And so I wonder what you learned about that, and what you think about it now.
Yeah. Seth is an amazing environmental attorney up in Providence. You too should. I think two things I want to say. One is that community is key, like both on like a apocalyptic survival level and on like a community mental health level. So like find people who share the grief and the desire for action. Find more of them. Talk about it. You know, there's a lot of social science that many more people are concerned about climate change than speak about it, and so everybody who thinks they're worrying about it all by themselves, they're not. And so if we talk about it more, it builds that community. And then the second thing I would say is like the whole last interlude is solutions, and none of them are like, let's wait for this magic thing to be invented. They all exist now today. Like there's no, it's like policy and it's decision making that means these aren't happening. And the US is heading in like this completely retrograde, stupid direction where emissions have gone up 2% just because we're like burning more coal. It's like ridiculous. But the rest of the world is not doing that. The rest of the world is racing towards renewables. They are they're recognizing that they have geopolitical independence by getting off of fossil fuels. Places that don't have any energy at all are just transitioning straight into. Like in Africa is electrifying. Pakistan.
Like Colombia, like there's a moratorium on like any kind of new oil, gas leases in Colombia. It's like that president ran on that, and then he got elected, and then he's doing it. Like it's
so we're in a super dark moment right now, but you know, like I think about this a lot, not just with this book, but like in general. Is like there's these tipping points, and in climate, those tipping points can be really scary, where warming leads to more warming. Melting of sea ice makes more dark ocean, and then there's more heat, and then there's more melting. So there's like tipping points are like a bad, scary thing a lot of the time within climate science. But there's human tipping points where things change when we like least expect them. Like nobody knew the Berlin Wall was going to fall that autumn in 1989, and it just happened. Like. So I'm just kind of hold on to that we are in a really like dark moment, but the solutions are all right here at our fingertips, and they're being implemented in all these different places. So that's where I try to hold on to tipping points and believing that we might head towards a good one and not just the bad ones.
Any more questions?
How or if did writing in a graphic format affect your thinking down the road about your other styles of writing, your normal writing?
I've started storyboarding when I'm working on pieces. Like I did a piece about vultures in the New Yorker, and I came back and I'm just like, what are the scenes? I'm like, okay, there's gonna be this, and there's gonna be this, and literally, I still have that like scrap of paper, and the like images from that they chose in the story, like are those like images like I sketched out. Like the photographer kind of like gravitated to the same imagery and stuff. So I think more in that sort of elemental graphic way to help me like work through like the structure of stories now. Um, and it was a really fun bending of my brain in terms of the exercise of like being forced to write concisely and to stay in other people's voices in a different way and not just be painting scenes, which is really fun to do, and we do that a lot. But not doing that, like knowing that Danica would be doing that part. So yeah, it's really changed how I think about storytelling in a fun way. It was sort of addicted. I'm like, oh, could it be fun to do that again?
Here's one. If you have, for the students in the audience, if you have any, like a piece of advice for, they've been working on communicating and learning about climate literacy, if you have one piece of advice as they kind of go out to do this work on their career path and moving forward.
I think the main thing is to like you'll know so much by studying this field, and when you encounter people, it's become such a hot button issue in so many ways. But the things that people care about are embedded in climate action. So like to make a better world, like be compassionate to people, especially if people are skeptical about it. Find out what they care about, and then you just adapt and translate whatever issue they care about. Oh, they care about,
Their peach farm.
their peach farm, right? Or their dog sledders who really like it when it snows in the wintertime and doesn't turn into slush. Or their fly fishermen. I did a whole series on conservative perceptions of climate change. It was like 9 stories from across the country. And people who are very, very conservative, have voted for Trump, and but also like recognize that the landscape was changing. So like I wasn't there being like, you need to care about climate change. I was like, what's happening with your peach harvest? Like it didn't set the fruit because it was too warm. Like, does that worry you? So like I think just being compassionate and listening to people, and then figuring out how to bring up the topic in a way that makes them like that connecting the dots thing. Like help people do that.
And I would say the flip side, I think not the flip side, but if you think about it from your perspective, also be attentive to like what really lights your fires.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the thing, when I first started writing about sea level rise, part of me was like, oh, this means that I'll get to report and do a lot of reporting in wetlands. And at first I was like, I wish they were mountains, but like, okay, wetlands, I'll take wetlands. Because it won't necessarily make you boatloads of money, but you do get to dictate. You will have control over where your heart and mind dwell.
Yeah.
And like the stories you choose, I mean, this took you 6 years. Like most of my books take 5, 7 years. And so you get to, it's the most wonderful gift to dwell inside of a certain topic for that long. So like, choose something that you're actually like that's going to replenish your soul as you work on it, because they are hard topics.
Yeah.
There's something difficult in there, and so definitely staying in the light of one of your passions has been important. I think
Yeah.
will be important.
Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson is a wonderful marine biologist and climate communicator, and she has a book called What If We Get It Right? And she, in her presentation, she has a great Venn diagram where it's like, what do you like to do? To Liz's point, what do you like to do? What skills do you have? Like, what are you good at? And what work needs doing? And find that sweet spot of where those things come together. And that's like the best way to there's no you don't have to become a climate scientist. You can be an artist, you could be a musician, you could be a poet, you could be a nonprofit administrator. Like there's all these different ways that you can enter.
You could be a
work.
kindergarten teacher.
Yeah. So there's no wrong way to do that.
Any final questions? Anything else?
Hello, thank you for coming. I was wondering if you've ever worked or done any partnerships with educators, and how telling stories different from our own lived experiences, how we can communicate those effectively and responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, this book is just like coming out into the world, so we're really trying to connect with educators. I had some great conversation with Sarah earlier of just trying to figure out how to do that. I'm going to be visiting schools during this book tour, so just stepping into that space and hoping that it will work. I mean, I have my prior book was used in uh, in universities and colleges, so there was that level, but like a different audience in that respect. And then, sorry, what was your second question? Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, like especially even like that series that I did about conservatives, like I was being very careful to not be like, so this guy totally said the wrong thing. He's done. Like you have to be very, very compassionate, and that's when I said earlier about just being compassionate and trying to understand not just like what somebody is saying, but why they believe what they believe. Like again, going back to that narratives are super powerful. They're also super dangerous. Like they could be narratives that are false narratives, and we're seeing that play out in our country in real time right now. But so storytelling is very powerful. So if you want to give, make sure that it's honest and trustworthy. Do your homework. Make sure you have it like buttoned up, like fact checking. You should be a fact checker. Everybody should be a fact checker at some point in their life, or just try and do it. Some article you like, go through that whole story and find every fact that was in it and see if you can verify it. Like it's such an important skill to have, and it's something that I really value, having learned as a journalist and as a fact checker early in my work. But you should be able to write a story so even if somebody disagrees with your position, that they recognize themselves in the story, that they recognize that you have gotten them right. And I've written not always shiny pieces about people, but I've never had anybody say you got that wrong. So like try to honor who they are and where they're coming from.
There's also like there's an amazing website called Open Notebook that does a kind of like illuminated manuscript of science stories, narrative science stories, and they will essentially like every single fact you can look at it and it will pop up where the fact came from, and it is really beautiful because a lot of the facts are like that sentence trafficked in 3 different sources, and it had to take like this first person narration and this article that the author found at JSTOR and this pamphlet. And so it's a really cool thinking about like as a teaching tool. I use that to be like, when we think about crafting rich narratives, we actually have to think about melding together in small contained spaces lots of different information from different sources. So that's really cool. And there's also a really neat source from the Columbia Journalism School called A Guide to More Ethical Storytelling. And it's like got 10 questions that you can ask yourself as you go out and do reporting. And I remember, I feel like years working without any of this training, I learned them, but in different difficult ways. And one of the first things was also, be clear with your sources about what your story can and cannot do. So I think there's a little bit of a sense that like, oh, maybe I'll tell you my story and something fundamental about the injustice that I'm suffering is going to change. And it's like, actually, being very honest, my story probably won't change that thing at all. To do that kind of change, you might have to get together with other people or work in your community. So I found that as like a really helpful guide. I was like, oh, I wish I had this when I was just starting out.
Amanda Ripley is another, I guess she was a journalist, but she was like recognizing that journalists are totally not trained in any sort of conflict resolution. So she just went down this whole path of like interviewing people who are trained in conflict resolution, whether they're therapists or religious leaders. And she wrote up this it's like 27 questions or something, like how to complicate the narrative. And it's all these ways to like questions you can ask, like, around really strong conflicting issues. Like, what do you think the other side gets wrong? or what do you think the other side gets right, or like just these really great questions that are, and I've used that as a teaching tool in the classroom as well. Of like, how do you like cross that divide by like complicating the story?
Great. Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, just a quick note on Amanda Ripley. She has a new book called Good Conflict that took sort of the 28 questions from complicating the narrative and has turned it into something even deeper than that. So those are great advice. I would say that this conversation is sort of like a little peek into what we do at Metcalf Institute. This happens on a daily basis in our workshops because while we love getting journalists to immerse in science and hang out with scientists, it's often really the conversations between the journalists that are so powerful because they get to spend time with each other in ways that they often don't get to. So just a round of applause. Thank you so much. And like I said, Mira and Liz will be at the back signing books, so you can also buy books if you haven't, but if you want your book signed. And thank you all very much for attending, and people on live stream as well. Thank you.